In a five-star restaurant buzzing with elite chatter, no one noticed the quiet waiter moving gracefully between tables until a sharp exchange of German words froze the room. The wealthy patrons smirked, assuming the black waiter had misspoken, but the man's flawless accent silenced every laugh. At a corner table, a billionaire lowered his glass, eyes narrowing in curiosity. By the time the meal ended, the waiter found a handwritten letter and something that would change his life forever waiting on the linen-covered table. But what was inside would stun him to his core. What? Do you think the billionaire wrote in that letter? Watch until the end, the answer will shock you. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves respect, no matter where they work. The morning sun spilled golden light across the elegant dining hall of one of the most prestigious five-star hotels in the city. Crystal chandeliers swayed slightly as servers glided from table to table, their polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. Among them was Jamal, a young black waiter with a quiet but dignified presence. He had worked at this hotel for nearly 3 years, always punctual, always polite, and always invisible, at least to the guests who barely glanced at him. Jamal didn't mind. He was used to being overlooked, used to people assuming he was just another face in a white apron. But what no one knew was that Jamal carried a story far bigger than this dining room. Every morning he would tie his crisp uniform and whisper a silent promise to himself that one day he would make his late father proud. His father had been a language professor who taught Jamal 5 different languages before he turned 12. Those lessons, once just a father's passion project, now felt like a secret gift, a hidden power. Jamal could move seamlessly from English to German, French, Spanish, and even Mandarin, though no one at the hotel ever asked. To most, he was just the help. The restaurant was bustling with the usual crowd, CEOs checking emails between bites, tourists snapping photos of their breakfast, and socialites making sure everyone could see their designer bags. Jamal stayed focused, balancing trays with perfect precision. That's when the manager rushed to him, a flicker of panic crossing his face. At a table near the back sat a group of international guests, one of them a sharply dressed German businessman. His words came fast and sharp, his face growing more frustrated by the second. None of the staff understood what he was saying. Jamal felt the familiar weight of expectation press on him. He knew he could help. But experience had taught him to be careful, to speak up only when absolutely necessary. His last job had ended badly after a customer accused him of being too bold just for offering an opinion. Now, as the manager looked around helplessly, Jamal had a decision to make. Step forward and risk being scolded, or stay silent and watch the situation spiral. He tightened his grip on the tray in his hand, heart thudding. The German man's voice rose and other diners started staring. Jamal could see the frustration in the businessman's eyes. He wasn't angry at the staff. He was desperate to be understood. And that's when Jamal took a deep breath, walked over, and gently spoke to the man in flawless German. The table fell silent. The businessman's face lit up with relief. Jamal translated his request quickly and clearly for the manager, who stood frozen, mouth slightly open. A ripple of whispers passed through the nearby tables. Guests, who had never noticed Jamal before, were now watching him like he had just performed a magic trick. And in that very moment, just as Jamal turned to leave, someone else was watching. At the corner table sat a billionaire philanthropist, known for her sharp eye and colder-than-ice reputation. She didn't just see a waiter translating German. She saw something more. Jamal returned to the service station, but his pulse hadn't settled. The murmurs from the tables followed him like a shadow. He had simply done what he was trained to do, make guests comfortable, but suddenly he felt exposed, like someone had peeled back the quiet shield he'd built for himself. He tried to focus on refilling coffee cups, but every step seemed to echo louder than before. The German businessman called him back twice more, each time smiling with gratitude, thanking him in a mix of English and German. The rest of the staff looked impressed, some even relieved that the tense moment had passed. But not everyone was pleased. Jamal caught the stiff glare of another senior waiter, one who had always resented him for being too perfect, too calm under pressure. That glare told Jamal exactly what would happen later. Quiet words behind closed doors about how he'd overstepped. By the time the breakfast rush ended, Jamal was exhausted, though not from the work. He slipped into the small break room and sat on the edge of a chair, rubbing his forehead. He thought about how hard he had fought to get this job after being turned away from others, sometimes without even an interview, just a look that said, "Not you." The door creaked open. Jamal straightened, expecting a reprimand from the manager. Instead, the billionaire philanthropist herself stood in the doorway. Everyone at the hotel knew her. Her photo hung in the lobby with a plaque describing the donations she had made to the city. She was elegant, commanding, the kind of person who didn't waste words. She stepped inside, glancing around the room like she was inspecting it for the first time, and then her eyes landed on him. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Jamal stood up, hands clasped in front of him, prepared to apologize for something he couldn't quite name. But instead of scolding him, she asked him a question. In German. It startled him so much that he almost forgot to answer. When he did, she smiled faintly and switched languages, speaking to him in French this time. Jamal replied without hesitation. Then Spanish, then Mandarin. Each time, Jamal kept up with her, matching her fluency with calm precision. The billionaire tilted her head slightly, clearly impressed. Word of what was happening traveled fast. Soon, two of Jamal's co-workers were peeking into the break room. Then the manager appeared, his face pale as if unsure whether he should be proud or terrified. For years, Jamal had been just another name on the schedule, another body to fill a uniform. And now the most important guest in the hotel was having a private conversation with him like he was her equal. But then came the moment that made Jamal's chest tighten. The billionaire didn't just thank him, she asked him about his life. No one ever asked. Jamal hesitated, unsure how much to share, but something about her steady gaze made him speak. He told her about his father, about how they used to sit for hours at their kitchen table practicing foreign languages, about how his father always said learning them would open doors one day. He told her how his father passed away before he could see Jamal graduate, and how he had been struggling to pay off his school loans while supporting his younger sister. By the time he finished, the room was quiet. The billionaire's expression had softened, not pity, but something deeper, something that looked almost like respect. She nodded once, then turned to leave. When Jamal returned to the dining room to finish his shift, something felt different. The other staff whispered as he passed, but there was no hostility this time, just curiosity. He even caught the senior waiter who had glared at him earlier, staring with something almost like admiration. Then, just as Jamal was about to clock out, the manager called him into the office. Jamal's stomach dropped. He braced himself for a lecture about professional boundaries. Instead, the manager handed him a small envelope. "This came for you," he said quietly. Inside was a handwritten note, in German. Jamal's hands trembled as he read it. It was from the billionaire. The note thanked him for his professionalism, praised his skill, and told him she had left something for him at the front desk. Jamal's heart raced as he walked to the lobby, the marble floor gleaming under the afternoon sun. At the desk, the receptionist handed him a slim ticket envelope. Inside was a plane ticket and a scholarship letter. The billionaire had arranged for Jamal to attend a prestigious international language program he had once dreamed of applying to but never could afford. But along with the ticket was something else, a simple message written at the bottom of the letter. "Your father would be proud." Jamal stood frozen in the hotel lobby, staring at the ticket and the note. For a moment, the world seemed too quiet. The hum of conversations, the ringing of phones, the shuffle of suitcases. All of it faded until he could only hear the sound of his own breathing. The scholarship letter felt heavy in his hands, heavier than anything he'd ever carried. This was the dream his father had planted in him years ago. A chance to take everything he had learned, every word and phrase he had practiced, and use it to step into a world that had always felt out of reach. But fear clawed at the back of his mind. Leaving meant walking away from the little security he had, the steady paycheck, the familiar routine. What if he failed? What if people were right about him, and he was just a waiter trying to pretend he was more? The next morning, Jamal arrived early for his shift, hoping to hide in his work, but it was impossible to ignore the stares. Word had spread about the envelope, about the billionaire who had asked for him personally. Staff members whispered and pointed, some with smiles, others with thinly veiled envy. The senior waiter who had glared at him just days before approached him during the breakfast rush, his tone softer. "Now. Looks like someone finally noticed what you're capable of," he muttered before walking away. But not everyone was supportive. Later that day, Jamal overheard two guests laughing near the bar. "Scholarship?" one of them said mockingly. "He's probably exaggerating. They just gave him a ticket so he'd stop bothering the important guests." Jamal kept his head down and walked past, but their words burned. The moment of decision came when Jamal was summoned to the manager's office once again. This time, the manager didn't look annoyed. He looked nervous, almost reverent. "She's here again," he said. "She asked to speak with you privately." In the private lounge, the billionaire waited, poised and calm. She gestured for Jamal to sit, then handed him another letter. This one formal, stamped with the seal of the international program. She explained that this wasn't just a ticket. It was a full scholarship, covering every expense. He would study abroad for a year, learn from some of the most brilliant linguists in the world, and when he returned, there would be a position waiting for him, not as a waiter, but as an interpreter for high-profile conferences she personally sponsored. The weight of the moment hit Jamal like a tidal wave. All the late nights he had stayed up studying alone, all the times he had been dismissed or underestimated because of the color of his skin, they all came crashing back. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "One day these words you carry will open doors." Tears blurred his vision as he realized this was that door. He was being invited to step through it. The billionaire extended her hand, waiting for his answer. Jamal took a deep breath, feeling the sting of his doubts and the weight of his fears, and then he nodded. Not just a hesitant nod, but a firm, decisive one. "Yes," he said quietly, but with a conviction that surprised even him. At that moment, something shifted inside him. The room seemed brighter, lighter, as if the walls themselves acknowledged what had just happened. The billionaire smiled, not politely but warmly, and stood shaking his hand firmly. When Jamal walked out of the lounge, the entire staff seemed to be waiting. They didn't know exactly what had happened, but they could see it on his face, the quiet glow of someone who had chosen to believe in himself. Even the guests in the lobby turned to look as he passed, sensing that something remarkable had just taken place. For the first time in years, Jamal didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. Weeks later, the hotel lobby looked different to Jamal. Or perhaps it was Jamal who was different. His last day of work felt surreal. Every table he served, every order he carried out, carried a sense of closure. When he took off his apron for the final time, he realized it wasn't just a uniform he was shedding. It was the weight of years spent hiding his light. On the day of his departure, the staff gathered to see him off. Some clapped, some simply nodded, but their expressions had changed. There was respect there now, even from those who had once doubted him. The senior waiter, who had always been dismissive, stepped forward and offered a rare handshake. "Go make us proud," he said. At the airport, Jamal held the scholarship letter once more, smoothing its edges as if memorizing its texture. He thought about his father, about the small apartment where he had first learned German words scribbled on scraps of paper. He wished his father could see this moment, could see him stepping onto a plane not as a servant, but as a man on a mission. Months passed, and Jamal flourished abroad. He threw himself into his studies, spending sleepless nights mastering languages, learning not just words but culture, context, and nuance. For the first time, he was surrounded by people who didn't look at him as just the waiter, but as an equal, as someone with a mind worth listening to. When the program ended, he returned home transformed. The hotel had planned a small reception to welcome him back, but the real surprise came when the billionaire personally greeted him. She handed him a new contract, one that officially named him as a senior interpreter for her company's global events. Jamal accepted, standing taller than ever. No longer did he blend into the background. He was now the one guiding conversations, breaking barriers, connecting worlds. Months later, during a major international conference, Jamal stood on stage translating a powerful speech to a packed room. Cameras flashed, Journalists scribbled notes, and somewhere in the crowd, a young busboy watched him in awe, just as Jamal had once watched others. That night, as Jamal packed up his notes, he thought about how a single moment, one act of courage, one choice to keep speaking, keep learning, had changed his life. Sometimes the world underestimates you until you make it impossible to be ignored. So, what about you? What hidden talent, what quiet passion are you carrying that could change everything if you dared to use it?